Last year in 2022, I produced 2 videos about Dehancer, digital film emulation software that helps you get that classic analog film look with your digital photos and videos. Well, today it's a new year and there's a new version of Dehancer. For this, Dehancer has effectively taken their desktop photography plugin and have developed a newer, smaller version of it for iOS. So now you have the ability to color grade and edit both your photos and your videos on your phone without needing a laptop or a desktop, which means that Dehancer is with you on the go, everywhere. You're able to do exactly the same thing here that used to require doing everything over there. If you are into classic analog film and you recognize names like Kodak Portra, Ektar, Ektachrome, Velvia 50, Fujicolor Pro 400H, Cinestill, Kodak Vision 3, I think you're going to enjoy this video. But before we get going, I need to let you know that this video is sponsored, which means that this video is more of a product showcase and demonstration as opposed to a critical review. But I want you to know that the reason I'm making this video is because I am a user of Dehancer. I use Dehancer over there on my desktop, especially with still photography. This is not a free app, it is a paid app, but the download is a free trial and you get, I think, like 8 or 10 image exports, something like that. At which point you hit a paywall and then you need to pay for the application. You can find the current pricing information for Dehancer in the App Store and in the app when you download it. Okay, so the first thing you see when you import a photo or video into Dehancer for iOS is the preset interface. And these presets here are created by Dehancer. You'll also find presets in here made by other Dehancer users. And you can also create your own presets. You can create them using the mobile app. You can also create them over on your desktop as well, which I think is really cool. If you have a Dehancer photo over there, you can create your own preset there, export a preset, airdrop it over to your phone, import it into here, and then use the exact same preset on your phone that you're using over there on your desktop. If you don't want to use your last edits or you don't want to use one of the presets that are provided for you here, you can just get rid of everything by coming down here to the far left and tapping on Original. So after tapping Original, you then tap on Edit, and here is the editing interface of Dehancer. And this is really like the heart and soul of the application, because this is where, let me just quickly show you here. These are emulations created by Dehancer using a lot of research, using a lot of time in order to get the most accurate film emulations possible using a number of different color negative and color positive films, motion picture films, instant films, ever since the beginning of smartphones, really. I mean, there have been so many apps that provide, film emulations or film looks. And a lot of those apps are, they have certainly not gone to the extent that Dehancer has gone to with their film emulations. Dehancer's emulations are always really well done, really well produced with very accurate colors and hues and tonality compared to the original film stocks. There is Agfa color. This is actually like one of my favorites. There's something about the look of Agfa color. It's very clean. It has like a nice like daylight color film look to it with this with these cyan highlights. Cinestill is based on Kodak Vision 3 motion picture film. They basically re-rolled and developed their own emulsion using Kodak motion picture film. So when you look at Cinestill 50D, which is daylight, and then Cinestill 800T, which is more of a tungsten-based film, you're getting that Kodak Vision 3 motion picture look. Now, Kodak Vision 3 is actually in here, so you could just use that. Fuji Eterna Vivid 500, expired 2013. That's one of the interesting things about some of these film emulations is that they have expired versions as well. And by the way, if you ever come across like a box of expired film, don't throw it out. Like put it on eBay or something, because there are people who really want expired film, because expired film has, like, there's something about the emulsion over time that just when it degrades, like the hues change and you get like some pretty crazy looks with it. And yeah, I mean, some people, that's what they want. Okay, so let's keep going. So we have Fujichrome Provia 100F, Velvia 100, and then we get to one of my personal favorites, Velvia 50. Velvia 50 is a color positive slide film that used to be made by Fuji, is unfortunately no longer available. Was a particular favorite amongst landscape photographers because of its dense saturation, really intense color that you were able to get out of the slide. Really beautiful emulation. I actually use Velvia 50, I think, more than any other film emulation in here when I'm editing photos over there, because I just love the colors and the look of it. But let's keep going. So we have Fujicolor 100, C200, and then we get to the heavy hitter known as Fujicolor Pro 400H. This film, again, is one that Fuji rather famously discontinued. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, despite the fact that this film was actually like one of the most popular like wedding and portrait photography films because it has a very minty, kind of clean look. You get very nice skin tones with it. It's gone. So that's kind of how it is, unless you happen to have some boxes in your freezer or something. Okay, Superior, another flavor, and some of you Fuji users will probably recognize these from your cameras. Like Fuji has some of these built in. Then we have the Instax, those are their instant films, of course. Ilford, heavy hitter in the black and white photography world. Okay, Kodak Ektachrome, I think everyone knows Ektachrome, very punchy colors with that. Ektar, one of my personal favorites, Ektar 100. You can still buy Ektar 100. Kodak Gold 200, this one is definitely still being made. Kodak Portra 160, the Portras, I mean, 160 NC, VC, 400, 800. Portra is really like the heavy hitter of film photography. I mean, today, in my opinion, I mean, it's like the MVP because it is a very neutral film. It's a very desaturated film. It's a very like fashion oriented film. It's not a bright, punchy like landscape film. It's, Portra is short for portrait. That's what it's designed for. And so you get really nice skin tones with it. And it also gives you like more of like a pastel look in an image as well. So portrait has always been quite popular. Okay, let's keep going. And then we have some punchier ones like Supra, Ultra Max, and then we get to Kodak Vision 3. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. Kodak Vision 3 is a motion picture film that Kodak is still making because a lot of filmmakers still continue to shoot in film. 4 different flavors here. There is 200T, 250D, tungsten and daylight, 500T, and 50D. And by the way, if you're familiar with Kodak color positive print film, Kodak Vision 3 2383. Well, we're gonna see 2383 coming up in just a minute. Some Impressa, some Loma Chrome. This is just gonna be insane. This is way too much for this image. And then there's this really weird one here that I'm like weirdly fond of. This is like this Orwo. I don't know what this is. I think this is like some European, some like rare, exotic European film that perhaps never made it to the United States. I don't know, but whatever it is, it's just got like this kind of like sci-fi kind of look to it that I particularly like. Okay, so then we have the Polaroids, of course. If you're looking for that Polaroid kind of look, you can get it. And then there's some other ones that you can explore here as well. Now, by the way, you don't have to like, dig through this entire interface. If you want to segment everything, you can tap on this drop down here. And here you're able to choose like whether you want color negative, motion picture, color positive, etc. So one of the interesting things about how Dehancer works and how Dehancer is different, just fundamentally different from other applications out there, is that after you apply a film profile, you then have the ability to push and pull that film. And this mimics, what photographers do in the real world when using film, because a lot of photographers who shoot film like to overexpose film in order to get a particular look, in order to change and shift the hues and the tonality of the image. So for example, I have Kodak Ektar 100 selected here, and if we purposely overexpose, you can see that the tonality and the colors in the image change. It's somewhat subtle. Let me just do it quickly so it's a little more obvious. You can see that it gets like a little more magenta when you push it up. And then if we go in the opposite direction, it gets a little more yellow. At the time of this review, I think there's a little over 60 films that are included in Dehancer, but if you factor in all the variants that are created through this push-pull slider here, well, the app actually has much more. Okay, so let me just pick one here so that we can keep moving on. I'm gonna choose Velvia 50 because I just like the colors and the tonality of it with this particular image because it's a landscape shot. Again, it's one of my favorites, so we're gonna do Velvia 50. So the next tool you'll see is compression. Now, I'll be honest, I have not experimented with compression all that much because this is actually new. Dehancer recently added this to the app, so I haven't had that much time to experiment with it. It's almost like an HDR tool, like it's one that can help compress the highlights. It affects the tonal range of the image. And by the way, if you make some settings with the tool and you don't care for them, you can just double tap on a slider and it resets to the default value. Or you can also tap on the tool in the bottom toolbar and that will disable all the settings from that tool. Now, the one that I actually use more than anything else is expand. And expand is kind of like expand adjusts the goalposts of the tonal range of the image. It adjusts the black point and the white point. And oftentimes just adjusting the black point and the white point gets you a pretty long way in getting the look that you want, the tonality and the contrast that you're looking for. So this image is a little bit bright, so I'm going to pull in the black point a little bit and maybe raise the white point some. Oh, and actually, to that point about maybe it's too much, well, you can actually tell if it's too much by tapping on the histogram up here at top left. So now we have a nice little histogram here underneath the image. And what you're seeing, let me just crank this up. What you're seeing in blue and red on top of the image here, these are clipped pixels. So anything that is dark blue is a clipped black pixel, while anything that is bright red is a clipped white pixel. And of course, when a pixel is clipped, that means that any detail that was there before is lost, is gone, because we're editing digital here. So let me just raise the white point a little bit just to brighten up some of these whites. So if I toggle this tool on and off, you can see the effect that we've had on the exposure, the brightness, and the contrast of the image. Okay, let's keep going down, and then we get to the print interface. Now, print is really interesting because in Dehancer, there's actually like two levels of emulation. First, there is the emulation of the film itself, and then there is the emulation of how that film looks when a photo is printed. And by printed, that means either printing to actual physical paper or to a print film stock like the aforementioned Kodak 2383 that I was talking about earlier. Now, just because we're editing a photo here, it doesn't matter. I mean, you're free to use one of these motion picture print films if you want to, if you like the look of it. No harm, no foul. I mean, it's, feel free to experiment here. But most of the still photography images, you would probably want to stick to Kodak Endura glossy paper because that is like a standard photography paper. Though I do have to admit, I do like the look of the 2383 print film. So maybe we'll keep it. So here in print, we have additional controls to further modify exposure. We can also adjust contrast as well, saturation. And I'm actually a pretty big fan of this color density slider here in the print area because it seems to increase the thickness of color. And this is one of the key differences really between the look of film and the look of digital, because with film, colors tend to be richer and denser. They have almost like a tangible thickness to them. Whereas in digital, when you increase the saturation of a color, it gets brighter. On film, it typically gets darker. Its luminance drops down. And that is one of the interesting things about Dehancer compared to pulling up the saturation using Lightroom or something like that, is that when you increase the density of color, it gets darker and it gets thicker, which is more like actual film. Okay, the next tool down is Color Head. And Color Head's kind of a weird name, but if you are familiar with darkroom terminology and hardware, this is from an enlarger. And typically with an enlarger, in order to, again, using a subtractive color process, in order to affect color, you would insert color gels into the light. And if you wanted less magenta in a shot, for example, you would add a magenta gel, which I know probably sounds backwards, but that's how it worked because it is a subtractive color medium. And that's effectively what Dehancer has replicated here with this interface. So we have yellow and blue. And the way in which this skews colors is there's just really something just visually and tangibly different about it than editing colors in a similar way using the HSL panel in Lightroom. And Color Head is a really great tool, I think, if, once you get your technical corrections in line and once you get the film stock, and the contrast and you get everything kind of where you want it, this is where you're able to play a little bit more with the look, the creative look of your film. This is almost like split toning it a little bit, just adding a little bit of color, shifting some of the colors around in order to get exactly the look that you're after. Now, also like an actual color head in a darkroom, you can gang all of these together and manipulate all of them at the same time if that's something you want to do. Okay, so after you get all that stuff out of the way, then comes the sweetening phase. It's kind of like after you bake a cake and it's time to put icing on the top of it. Well, now we get to the effects. And this is another thing here that distinguishes Dehancer and makes it different from other applications because it has some really interesting film effects in here to really sell the look of film. Okay, the first one is film grain. Now, grain is nothing unusual. Grain is obviously available in many other applications. But the difference between grain here and there is that with other like raw photo processing apps, grain is monochromatic, whereas in color film, grain is colorful. Grain has a texture and a thickness, and there's also some imperfection in it. It tends to be like a little bit clumpy and not quite as like digitally precise as modern grain, as like digital grain that you see. So the film grain that's in Dehancer is modeled on analog film grain that is clumpy, that's imperfect, and has flecks of color, like little bits of magenta and green in there. So actually, let's take a close look at that. So if we just zoom into the image here, and you can see how there's like all these little like, let me just toggle it on and off. You can see how the grain kind of like clumps up in certain areas compared to others. It's imperfect, it's not digitally precise. And right now it's a little monochromatic. So let me come down to color, crank up the color, come back down. Now in the clouds here, I can definitely see little bits of magenta and green in there. And that's really, really cool. You then have additional options here to be controlling where the grain goes, because every film can be a little bit different. So you can adjust the shadows, you can adjust the midtones, you can pull all the grain out of your highlights if you want to, so that your highlights are very clean and you're only seeing the grain in the shadows and the midtones. Or you could go the opposite way. You could, you could get really clean shadows. If, for example, there's some detail in your shadows that you don't want to ruin, then you could just only apply grain to those other areas. Okay, so I would definitely recommend, by the way, when editing a photo using the iOS app, to zoom in and when you're making these adjustments, because you don't want to be like all the way out here and making these changes, because you're probably going to go too heavy with them because you're looking at a small preview. So you definitely want to come in, zoom in a bit in order to really get a look at the image. Okay, let's keep going down. The next one down is halation. Now, if you are familiar with film, you probably know all about halation. Halation is that reddish glow that you sometimes get around specular highlights, practical lights in a shot. And it's just one of those unique things, one of those anomalies about film that just really says to you when you're looking at it, oh, I'm looking at something different. Yeah, definitely don't want a whole lot. And again, we have just loads of control here, loads of options to experiment with. So let me just toggle this on and off. And you can see there's just like a little extra something. There's just a little extra glow around those highlights. You don't always have to use halation. I'm not sure this is, quite the right image for it, but if I had an image that had like neon in it or some type of, high contrast like headlight or a practical light, that is an option for you to explore. Really fun to experiment with. Okay, next one down is bloom, and bloom is like one of those diffusion mist filters that you would buy for a camera, a traditional camera. It diffuses the light that is coming through and basically softens the highlights. It lifts the contrast a little bit. Like light actually looks like light when it is diffused, and it doesn't look quite as perfect as it normally would when shooting digital. And actually for a shot like this, I kind of like the bloom look. I mean, it's very subtle. Let me see if you can see this if I come in here. And you can see how the light, it's almost like the highlights are kind of like spilling out and over the rock here, which just makes it less perfect and I guess makes it a little more emotive. That's kind of the feeling I get when I look at it. And it emulates the look of that diffusion filter if it works. Now, again, these things don't always work for every image. It's just really up to you to explore and see what you like. And of course, we have plenty of options here to be adjusting bloom. I mean, it's kind of crazy what you're able to get into. Okay, so next we have Vignette. Now, Vignette, this is, another thing you can do in order to make a digital smartphone photo look a little less smartphone, because this is emulating the natural behavior of like an interchangeable lens on a traditional camera by introducing a little bit of darkening around the corners and edges of the frame. Helps keep the viewer's eye in the center of the frame and keeps it from spilling out of the edges, and helps accentuate whatever the subject is in the center. Vignette's one of those things that some people love it, some people hate it. It all really, for me, comes down to the image that you're editing. I don't think it's always needed, but sometimes it does help balance exposure and bring a little extra focus. And for this image, I think it looks pretty good. So I'm just gonna keep that. And by the way, I forgot to mention, if at any point during your edit, while you're editing an image, if you're not happy with the changes that you just made, there are history state buttons up here at the top right, so you can step back. You can also step forward again. This is basically like undo and redo on a desktop. And then up here at top left, we have this backwards arrow, and this reverts you all the way back to the original image. If you get deep into an edit and you're like, oh, I'm hating this, I'm not liking this at all, you can just blow it all away and start over from scratch if you want to. So I'll go ahead and do that. And do I want to reset everything? Am I sure? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So I'm just gonna hit OK, and then we go back and see how much the image has changed, right? That was my original raw file, and I can actually undo that change and then go back to this image here, which I think looks loads better. Okay, so again, this was just a quick edit. I mean, I could spend days, sitting here editing this, but we need to keep going. So the next thing to do after you've finished editing a photo is export it, do something with it, right? So over here at the far right of the toolbar, we have the share icon, and here you can save a new copy of your original image to your camera roll, save it to photos, or you could share it, you can airdrop it, post it to a cloud hosting, post it to social media, whatever you want to do. You export it from here. Before wrapping things up here, I want to show you really quick editing video using Dehancer for iOS, because this is a new feature that's going to be coming out soon. By the time you watch this video, it could already be live. So this video here is one that I captured using the cinematic mode on the iPhone 14 Pro Max here. This was one that I shot of my daughter in Hawaii during a recent trip. So if you wanted like the look of Fuji Pro 400H with your video, you could certainly do that. You could also use, where's the other one? We could also do Kodak Gold 200, get that kind of look. Kodak Portra, let's give that a try. Or we could select a motion picture film stock. So let's do that. Going to select, let's see, Kodak Vision 3 500T. But then to really sell it, let's come down here to the print interface. And I'm going to change the print profile to Kodak 2383. And now we're getting those yellows in the highlights, some of that cyan, some of those cool tones in the shadow, darker areas. It's a really nice look, I think. And if we tap and hold on the image, actually I forgot to mention that earlier, but if you just want to like, toggle, the look of the film on and off, you can just press and hold on it. Really, really good. Again, with just minimal effort. I mean, I did barely anything here. Okay, that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please take a moment and give this video a thumbs up down below. And while you're down there, if you would care to download Dehancer for iOS onto your own iPhone, you're going to need an iPhone XS or newer. You may do so by clicking the link in the description box that you will find down below. Thanks so much to Dehancer for supporting this video, and of course, thanks to you as well for your time and attention. I really do appreciate you being here. If you would care to do this again, please remember to subscribe to this channel down below. And I also have a weekly email newsletter that I put out as well that has updates and other things that don't make it here to my YouTube channel. If you would care to sign up for that, you'll find a link down below in the video description. 2 ways to keep in touch with me and anything new that comes out, should you care to do so. I appreciate it. Again, your time. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you in the next one.